Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Rafael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Annie. Thank you so much for joining me today on Coaching Call. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, absolutely. We have so much to talk about, right?
We do.
Tell us a little bit about what you do. This way we can understand what the topic is truly going to be about today.
Okay. Well, I help people transition through major change in their life. Oftentimes that is divorce. I'm a certified divorce coach, but I have a secondary certification as a life transition coach because the skills that you use to get you through divorce will get you through just about anything, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's all about your mindset. And so any kind of major life change that you're going through, you can apply the same skills and coping mechanisms, if you want to call it that, the strengths and the core beliefs that you need to get through that well.
Nice. So divorce, that's a huge, huge topic, if you will, right? Wouldn't it be nice if it was hard to get married and easy to get divorced? Wouldn't that be awesome?
It probably would help in some degree.
It definitely would help a ton. And I guess, my biggest question is not only that I've asked myself, but I ask everybody is, why did you get married in the first place? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really good question for people who are thinking about divorce. They haven't filed yet. They're just really unhappy and
Right.
they feel like they've tried everything. And sometimes it's really helpful to get them to go back to that place where things were good and to then figure out from there, what are they doing differently or what is their partner doing differently? And is there a possibility that you and or your partner are willing to return to the things that you were doing when you first got together? And if one or both of you are, then there could be a hope for some change that would be positive and be able to sustain the marriage. But if not, then you have your answer as to whether or not you can be happy in that relationship any longer.
Right. So, and you talked about people who may be going through that process, right? It doesn't, unless something tragic happens, it doesn't really start from one day to the next. There's so many little things that affect that decision on one or both parties, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how long would you say typically does it take for that culmination of, I want a divorce, I'm done with this?
I don't know. I don't think there's a number, but it's usually a really long time. Months and months or years, because probably it's been discussed, it's been thought about and put off for a very long time when somebody finally says, I just can't do this anymore.
Yeah. So for one person, they may think they're in a happy relationship, right?
That's true.
But maybe the other one has already moved on because guess what? They cheated,
Mm-hmm.
or they're constantly cheating,
Mm-hmm.
or they just shut down, right? So there's so many factors that we can talk about. So let's talk about the first factor of you remove yourself from that relationship, by the actions that we take, right? So let's talk about that if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. And you brought up a good point earlier that just because you're at a place where you've decided that divorce is the answer doesn't mean your partner is in that same space. And so oftentimes that's something I talk about when I have a coaching client who's in the process of divorce and they're frustrated with their spouse's behaviors and actions. And we have to talk about and remember that they aren't where you are. They're like usually 3 months behind you in processing the fact that this is even happening. So, there's a lot of just confusion and frustration on both people's parts, but they're in different places usually on in the grief cycle and the healing cycle because one has known longer than the other that it was going to be happening. But as far as so, what was your specific question?
Well, as far as the difference of where somebody may be, their mind is already somewhere else. They've
Oh,
moved
okay.
on, right?
Okay.
So how does somebody start to learn to cope with that? Even when they, you know what, maybe let's say that they found out that their spouse is cheating, right? But they really thought they were in a great relationship, in a loving relationship. And we don't know. We can't control other people's actions, right?
Mm.
So when it comes to that, how do we prepare ourselves either to stay in that relationship or to mentally say, you know what? I can't deal with this. I don't want somebody who I don't trust anymore to be in a relationship with. So how do we start working through that?
I think that is the first question that you have to ask yourself, and
Mm,
that may take some time for you to decide what is the answer to that. Do I want to stay in this relationship? Can I learn to trust again? Does that person regret their actions and really want to change and return emotionally to the marriage or not? And you have to decide those things in order to know whether or not you want to continue to try to restore the marriage or if it would be more healthy for you to move on and end this relationship.
yeah, for example, when I got divorced, it was not my choice. I did not want to get divorced. So I try to work it through. I said, let's go to therapy, let's do this. But for my partner at the time, it was done. It was done. There was nothing
Good.
I can say. Um, and the whole thing is, even months after, I would be like, hey, want to try going on a date? Want to try? So for me, I could not accept it, right? Because I got married for life.
Mhm.
That was me, right? That's the way I think.
Yeah.
So it was a whole game that was going on in my head. And when I finally moved out of my own house, which I was still paying the mortgage for, and 2 weeks after I moved out, her boyfriend moved in. Wow. Did that hit
Mhm.
home for sure, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't even know she had a boyfriend. And the craziest thing is I knew the guy. So,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So, but here's the thing, right? So once I moved out, I still was in love with her. I still thought, maybe she'll come back to her senses. And what wound up happening for me, I'm a very, very high functioning individual. So I have energy no matter when I wake up. I didn't sleep for the first year, no more than 15 minutes. I couldn't sleep.
Oh,
But
wow.
I had high energy. It wasn't like I was tired. I wasn't like napping. I just could not go to sleep. So instead of sleeping, I would do things. I learned stuff. I taught myself so many different things to preoccupy myself because I was not going to sit in self pity, which
Mhm.
winds up happening a lot, right? When it's not your fault
Yeah.
and you don't understand what the other person is thinking. a
Yeah.
lot of people go through that self-pity thing. Talk to us about how we can and how you help people get over that self-pity.
Well, one of the things that you said when you were speaking just now was the word accept. And I think that is something that I work on a lot with my clients because whether the divorce was their idea or not, they probably didn't really want it. Even if they filed for divorce, oftentimes it's because they just have no more hope that it can get better. And they still don't
Right.
want to go through a divorce. And even if they do want to go through a divorce because maybe they've met somebody else or whatever, then there's still a loss that is happening because you don't get nobody gets married thinking they're going to go through a divorce. So
Right.
there's still a loss of a plan and a vision and a dream that you had for this relationship. And the thing that is so important is acceptance because whatever happened that led up to the demise of the relationship is you can't change it. You can only accept that that is where you are right now for whatever reason, and that, to move forward from there requires you to accept that you're on a journey and the other person that you were married to is on a journey, and for whatever reason your journeys are no longer going to be together. And that is really hard to accept for, a long time.
Oh
And
yeah.
and really it just takes time. It takes
Mhm.
time and acceptance to move forward in a way that feels good to you, and nobody gets there quickly, I don't think.
No, yeah, without a doubt. You know, and that acceptance is something that, it took me a long time. This
Yeah.
is me personally, and I'm opening up to you. But the whole thing is I had two children, right? One was 3 months old,
Mm,
which was, I don't get it. We just had this beautiful child. Why are we getting divorced? So something
yeah.
was amiss, right?
Yeah.
So I could not understand the whole thing. And like I said earlier, it is out of our control how another person is going to act,
Yeah.
what they're going to do, their actions. So understanding that it's not necessarily my fault, unless it was, right? Unless it was, then it's
Yeah,
different,
that's
right?
true.
But and and when we think about it, was it when we think about it wasn't my fault, but maybe we did play a part in that. Maybe we didn't do all the things that we thought we were doing, right? Maybe in when we were courting, we were doing certain things. And a lot of people, and I see this happen in relationships, they start by courting and they do certain things to try to capture their mate, if you will, right? Besides hitting them with a bat and carrying them away like cavemans used to do, there's so many different things that we have to do nowadays to court someone.
Mhm.
But then once they get them, it's like, okay, I don't have to do that stuff anymore. But I think to me, that's where things start to fall off.
Yeah.
I'm a romantic. What can I say? So for me, bringing flowers, if that was, what they liked. I'm in a relationship now, and I can bring her flowers, and she'll go, "Thanks." I'm like, "Do you like them?" She's like, "They're okay." So then I know that's not what triggers her, right? That's not
Yeah. That's
so
not her love language.
right. But every so often, if I'm out somewhere and I see something, I'm like, I think she liked that. And I'll bring it home and then she'll go, "What's that for?" I'm like, "It's for you. I thought of you." She's
Mhm.
like, "You're always doing that." And I'm like, "I'm always thinking of you." So, it's that keeping the love alive, I think, what will keep a relationship alive, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about divorce. We're talking about that that unity that we came to in the beginning is on its way out or it's out,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
What do you find as the biggest obstacle when it comes to divorce,
The biggest obstacles of divorce are ego and emotions.
right?
The process of divorce is actually not that complicated. and it doesn't take that long. And we can see that because we see long once in a while, we see a couple who figures out together how they want to divide their estate and what they want their family to look like going forward. And then they go hire one attorney and they file everything, and it's done in like
Mm.
less than 2 months. And it didn't cost a lot. But that doesn't happen often enough because ego and emotions.
Mm.
Either emotions are keeping people tied to the process of fighting, or their emotions are dragging them, like they are dragging their feet because they don't want the divorce, and they
Right.
think that they can stall the process long enough for the other person to change their mind, I guess. I don't know. Just depends on the situation. But and then ego, obviously, if somebody, goes into a divorce situation, feeling like after 20 or 30 years with somebody that they're just going to keep everything, and that other person's just going to be out of luck, for whatever reason, either because they've already moved on or because they feel like that person did something wrong, that they don't deserve their half of anything.
Right.
That's going to obviously stall everything. So that's really where, attorneys get a bad rap, because they're looked at like the problem in divorce. And sometimes, frankly, they can be.
They can be.
But there are a lot of really good attorneys out there that really just want to help people part amicably and responsibly. But the people in the situation don't want that for whatever reason, usually ego and emotions. So.
Yeah, yeah. You talk finance. Divorce was filed in 2004 for me.
Mhm.
I did not get my actual divorce papers till 4 years later, 2008. It
Wow.
was crazy.
Yeah.
And it did cost me about $160,000. And the last time we were in court, and I said to her, look, I'm spending a lot of money. You're spending a lot of money. Why don't we stop this nonsense and give the money to the kids?
Mhm.
We're taking money away from them when we could have resolved this
Yeah.
without even lawyers. We could have
Yeah.
just said, okay, this is not going to work. I get it. Yes, I still wanted to be with you. You don't want to be with me. It's not going to, I moved out. Here
Mhm.
we go. Here's the divorce. This is what's happening. And it could have been solved that quickly.
Yeah.
But that's why I said, wouldn't it be easy to get divorced in a week, and then courting should be like, you can't get married for 4 years until, or
Yeah.
whatever, you have to go through this whole process, in order to get married, because
Yeah.
it is a business venture, if you will. When you talk finances, it
Mhm.
is a structure, venture. It is a logistics. It is a real estate develop. It's so many things that when we think about marriage, it is not just one thing. It's not just two people coming together. For me, it's, I have my way of doing things. You have your way of doing things. Now we got to merge those and figure it out together. And sometimes when people get um, into a relationship, it's all amazing, and then they actually have to live together, and things are like, whoa, I don't like this, I don't like that, and da, da, da. So I think that the discussions that we have to have prior to taking our vows, right? And it's pretty incredible when these vows are supposed to be till death do us part. And to me, that I listen to that, right?
That meant something to
So
you. Yeah.
neither one of us died, so why are we getting divorced?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
But, you make an excellent point that it's too easy to get married without really understanding what you're entering into. And yet, I mean, I think maybe some religious organizations, try to put something in place, to have people have, like premarital counseling before they get married. But not outside of that, there really isn't any kind of framework for helping people to understand how to actually have a good marriage, not just a good wedding. And
right.
it's interesting how much people put into tens of thousands of dollars sometimes into planning a wedding, and they don't put any time or money or energy into planning the marriage. How are you guys going to communicate? Do you
Yes.
both want the same number of children? Where do you
Mhm.
want to live? What is your lifestyle? What are your religious and political ideals? And, all of these things that are going to come into play. How do you spend money? Are you a spender or a saver? And one that you mentioned earlier, your love language. Huge.
Mhm.
If you're speaking your love language to somebody and their love language is something else entirely, they're going to be like, "Oh, thanks. But that didn't really mean as much to me as it would have if you'd have spoken my language," whatever that might be. So
Right.
that's a really cool topic to study as well. But point being, you really need to know what you're entering into. And in the divorce process, every state's different, but some states, especially with real estate and children involved, require mediation. And
Mhm.
that just is to say, we're not going to let you go to court and use, the court resources and all of that if you haven't at least tried to work out an agreement. And so, it's interesting. Why don't they do that when you get married? Required mediation prior to marriage to work through all of, the plan for what the marriage is going to look like. I think that could make a huge difference, but I don't see it happening. But,
Yeah.
you as a human can make that decision on your own. You don't have to have it forced on you. You can make the decision that you're going to, if you enter into a new relationship, you're going to have those conversations and make sure that you guys are on the same page. And agree with you that if you're whatever you did to get somebody to like you and to enter into a relationship with you, you should probably keep doing
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
Because if you
Yeah.
don't, maybe somebody else will be, somewhere
Somebody else will
else.
be. Yeah. Yeah. The funny thing is that sometimes people don't realize what they have. They'll think that the grass is greener on the other side, and it may look that way until you get there, and there's
Yeah,
weeds everywhere, right?
for sure.
So the funny thing is, for me, is that I still get, finally, I'm able to talk to my ex without her cursing at me. And the reason, here's the crazy thing is, I would call to talk to my kids, and she would start ranting on something and start cursing, and I'm like, "Are the kids there?" She's like, "Yeah." So I would hang up, and then she'd call again and start cursing. I go, click, click, and she didn't get it. And I said, "Look," I said, "anytime you curse at me and the kids are around, I will hang up." I said, "You can curse at me as long as the kids are not around. I don't care what you say to me, but I don't want the kids hearing that language," right? Because I was there to protect my kids. My kids, even though I did love her and I was not asking for the divorce, once it was and I knew that we were definitely doing it, then my main focus was my kids.
Yeah,
That's it. They were number one. She no longer mattered because, you know, at one point, obviously, I had to move on too. So
right.
for me, it was that realization that the person that truly mattered were those two boys of mine, and they were everything. And that's the only reason I married her.
Mhm.
Just so you know, we were together for 7 years, and she didn't want kids. So I was not looking to get married. When she actually turned around and said, "I think I now want kids," and I said, "Are you absolutely sure?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, then let's get married." So for me, I had a goal,
Yeah.
I had a purpose, right? And then once the divorce started truly going, and I knew there was no going back, even though I couldn't sleep or whatever, the minute I moved out of my house and her ex-boyfriend, I mean, her, well, ex-boyfriend now, her boyfriend at the time moved in, I like, okay, it's totally, there's no way going back.
Mhm.
And I said, the most important people in my life are my boys. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So that was my focus, you know?
And that's how it should be,
Yeah.
We're adults, they're not, so we can handle more than they can, so
So, being that I realized that, and I would not allow her to kind of put herself down, because if my kids kept seeing her cursing, right, being nasty, it
Mhm.
was going to put a bad taste in my kids' mouths, in their brains, right? I didn't want my kids to ever see their mom as a bad person, because
Yeah.
she was not a bad person, right? When we dated, I would never have married her if I thought she was a bad person.
Yeah.
But then also, I was never one, when my boys were with me and I had, my visitation with them, I would never say anything negative about her. And I would never allow my kids to say anything negative. And one time I went to their house, and one of my sons started, and they're teenagers now, one of my sons started cursing at her. And the one that was 3 months old, right? He's
Mhm.
cursing at his mother. And I'm like, whoa. I said, everybody stop. I said,
Mhm.
what on earth is going on here? He's like, well, she did it. I said, no. I said, this is your mom. You do not talk that way to your mom, period. And I don't know if she was floored by what I said, but I protected her,
Yeah.
because I'm teaching my children that we need to show each other respect. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what the other person said or did. We still have to respect one another. And what winds up happening, and I've seen it a lot in divorce, is where people badmouth the other parent, and
Yeah.
they forget why, and to our initial conversation, why they fell in love with each other and decided to go into that union, right?
Mhm.
Whether it was at a synagogue, at a church, a temple, it doesn't matter. But you guys made a vow to each other, and because you were in love.
Mhm.
And, I think that there are things that people can do to hurt that love, right?
Yeah.
But we still have to remember that we did love that person once.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important no matter what the situation is to, act with, whatever is right for you. You don't wanna be that person that, well, they were, horrible to me, so I'm gonna be horrible to them. No, that's not who you are.
Yeah.
You be who you are. Respect them and require your children to respect them, and that alone would, resolve a lot of the issues that we see in divorce, is just to respect each other.
Mm.
And it unfortunately just doesn't happen
Yeah.
enough.
Not enough, not enough. Demi Moore used to go on vacation with Bruce Willis after they got divorced with
Oh,
their
really?
kids. And I thought, wow, that is so cool, because it was not about them.
Yeah.
At this point, it was family, right?
Mhm.
And so for me, that's something that I've always wanted. So finally now, my ex and I, she actually texts me. She not too long ago, someone we mutually knew passed away, and she texted me and she goes, "Can you believe so and so passed away?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." And then we had a quick conversation on it, but it was more like, you know what, we're adults,
Yeah.
right? And like you said before, and the real purpose should be our kids, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so many people forget that, hey, we had something. It was
Mhm.
special because we planned it, right? We planned that wedding. We spent tons of money. I was at a wedding this past 2 weekends ago, and the amount of money that was spent on this wedding, can I tell you, I've been to weddings, and I've been to extremely lavish weddings where it's over 500 people. I've been
Mhm.
to weddings where it's been 30 people, but it's still that you're bringing people together to witness that union, right? To
Mhm.
to say, look, I love this person, they love me, and we want to share it with everybody. But the money that is spent sometimes is, I think, more than is needed. Because the reality of it is, do we need 2 hours of desserts? Do we need all that? And then you have your traditions, the father dances with the bride, the whole
Mhm.
thing. And then for me, it's truly the vows that are and should be the most important part. And
Mhm.
everyone there is just a witness. And a
Yeah.
lot of people forget that part, that I'm doing this wedding to show off what we can afford, how luxurious it can be. Meanwhile,
Mhm.
you can go to some of the most expensive weddings, and then a year later, 2 years later, there's divorce. So it
Yeah.
really meant nothing
Yeah.
without those vows that truly that's everything, if you will, right?
Right. I agree.
How do you help someone? And you talked about transitioning, right? So that's some one of the things that you help people, because do people come to you and go, Annie, I'm considering getting divorced, but I'm not there yet? Or
Mhm.
do they come to you and say, we're getting divorced and I need some guidance? Or the other one is, I just got divorced yesterday. I need guidance.
Yeah.
All of them, right?
Right. Absolutely, all of them.
So let's talk before.
More the
Let's
before
talk.
and
Let's
during.
let's
Yeah.
talk. Let's go through all of them, if you will.
Sure. Yeah.
Someone is considering divorce, but they're not there yet, and they wanna try to work it out, and maybe both parties want to, or sometimes it's only one party that wants to work it out. Like I,
Yeah.
I was the one party, but if both parties are willing to work it out, how much of a chance do they have if they both are willing to do it?
I oftentimes work with, the woman because that's my client, my target client.
Mhm.
And generally speaking, because of my own personal experience and just the platform that I've built for my business, the person that seeks my assistance in that stage of wondering whether or not they are going to get divorced and thinking that's probably the direction they're going is usually in a relationship where the other party is toxic, narcissistic,
Mm,
verbally abusive, psychologically abusive. They're being gaslit, controlled, manipulated. And
right.
so there is not hope for that relationship. But that
Mm,
person sometimes has not come to terms with that. And so I
right.
actually have a support group that usually people will become a part of during that phase of their life when they're just trying to understand what this relationship is about. This all of the dynamics of their relationship that maybe they're just starting to awaken to and they realize this is not normal. I should
Mm,
not be living like this. This isn't what a
right.
marriage is supposed to be like, but yet they love that person and they want to work things out and they're still really trying everything that they know to be sure that they're sure. And I encourage that because I don't think anyone should move forward through the divorce process unless they are 100% sure they have done everything they can do to save the marriage because there's just too much regret and there's just too much at stake. So it's very important to me to help people through that process of, well, did you try this and did you try that? And how's that going? Is it working? And keeping a good focus at all times on their own mindset and what they can control and behaving in ways themselves that they won't regret and have regrets about. So that is a big part of it for people that are in the before stages of divorce. For
Mm,
those who come to me because they're already in a divorce, it's generally more there is some emotional support that's needed and oftentimes they will also be in a support group, but their concerns usually are more on the practical level of, I've filed, discovery is due in 30 days.
mm,
What do I, how do I do this? Where do I get this information? Who do I need to help me with this part of the process? And so there's a lot of practical matters that we're dealing with the timeline of the legal process, getting them connected with an attorney that's a good fit for them to make sure
Hmm.
that they're, going to be on the right track, and then, helping them get connected with other divorce professionals that they might need, whether that's a mortgage specialist who understands divorce, who can help them decide whether or not it makes sense for one or the other to keep the house or to sell it, and whether or not they can qualify to buy something on their own. It could be an insurance issue or a credit issue, or just so many things change as you're going through divorce. So part of my job in the process of divorce is getting people connected to the people that they need to know so that they can move forward well, and then providing them the emotional support through that process as well, so that they, you know, don't, again, like I said, ego and emotions are what slows down and muddies the divorce process. So really trying to help my clients understand so that they don't get in the way of the process.
Hmm. Oh
And
yeah.
then occasionally I do have clients that come to me after. Generally speaking, that's pretty rare. If I'm working with somebody after divorce, it's probably because I already worked with them before and during, and they want to just continue to work on the personal goals that they've set for themselves. I don't often become their coach after the divorce is final, but that does happen sometimes. I actually have a client right now who's just struggling to move forward and really questioning things, and so she actually did become a client after the divorce was final. So it does happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So because there is so much that goes into even getting a divorce, right? Besides all that goes into getting married to begin with, right?
Mhm.
Because and there's so many caveats that go into everything that we do, right? When we're trying to come together, right? We are looking at living situations. So a realtor may be involved. And then at the end, a realtor may be involved,
Yeah.
right? And then uh, we got to think about banking, right? Do we
Mhm.
have joint accounts? Do we not have joint accounts? Do we have a separate account? Do both parties know about the other person's account that they didn't tell them, right? So
Yeah, there's a
there's
lot of
so
that.
many aspects to everything. And then what winds up happening, and I think that children definitely create a different entity, if you
Mhm.
will, because all of a sudden, a lot of people who had friends and they go, yeah, I had a friend, but they got married. And I'm like, oh, so that person threw everybody away. But now when they get divorced, what do? They go looking for those friends, right?
Yeah.
And those friends are like, yeah, you dumped me for that guy or for that girl. Remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, our friend groups change depending on our personal situation because we wanna be friends with people that are like us. And
Mhm.
so when we're single, we have single friends. When we're married, we have married friends. When we go through a divorce, we suddenly find that all the people that were our friends aren't anymore.
Mhm.
And maybe that's a sudden and an intentional decision on their part because they took your ex's side of, the or argument, or
Right.
maybe it just kind of fades out because you just don't have that common bond anymore of being married, and so then you have to develop new friendships with people who have gone through a divorce. And
Right.
so, it's just, I feel like, we have to accept that. That's another point that we have to accept, and we have to grieve that in order to accept it,
Mm.
because it is a loss, when we expected friendships, and sometimes it's family relationships even, when we expect those to continue and they don't, it's a loss and it's hurtful, and we have to work through that. But eventually we make new friend groups, and we see that, everything happens for a reason, and we're able to move forward, but it does take some adjustment.
Right. So, do you help someone? I'm not trying to make fun of it, but just the thought of it, it, it it does put a smile on my face because it could be hurtful for that person if they go into a pity party, right? If
Mhm.
they're like, "Oh, poor me, poor me, poor me," because all of a sudden, depression can set in, right?
Oh, yeah.
And all this negativity definitely can set in.
Mhm.
So, and I know there are support groups out there, and I think it's a great thing for people to feel. And like you said, we may have to get new acquaintances, right?
Mhm.
Someone who is kind of on our side, but not necessarily if we're putting the other person down. So a lot of times, I think outside my office is a big truck now. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
So we love big trucks, right?
Yeah.
So when we think about divorce, there are so many aspects to it. When we think about a union, there's so many aspects to it. So I'm equating them both to business, right? For two companies to merge, they need lawyers, don't they?
Mhm.
If it's a big company.
Yeah.
Let's say if Coca-Cola and Pepsi decided to merge, it wouldn't just be the two owners saying, "Yeah, let's get together and, you
Yeah.
know, we'll start, uh, Pepsi Coke tomorrow or Coke Pepsi, whatever," right?
Mhm.
It would be where a ton of lawyers would have to come in, would look at everything, and then if they decided to split, the same thing would happen. Tons of lawyers, this whole thing.
Mhm.
So when two people merge, I'm thinking business, right? When two
Yeah.
people merge, and you said it before, wouldn't it be better to get an advisor? Maybe not lawyers, but anybody who is looking to get married. And you know what happens is we get married blind, don't we?
Mhm.
We do. You and I both did, right?
Love is blind.
Darn it! I just wanted to peek a little bit, but you went through your experience, right, of getting divorced. And I know I've been talking about mine, and you don't need to share with yours, but you decided through that experience to help people. What was it? What was that moment that you realized it's not just me?
Well, so the moment when I realized that the marriage was over, is that what you're referring to?
Yes and no.
Okay. I wasn't sure I understood your question, so
Sure.
before I
But go
answer
ahead.
it, I
So
wanna clarify.
when was the moment that you knew that your marriage was over?
That is very clear. That was on 6/1/16, June 1st of 2016.
Mm,
Um, and there, a series of events had occurred. There was another argument going on, and something was said to me that just stunned me,
mm,
and I left the situation and I would often go for walks in the woods that was near where we lived, and I was walking and I was just crying out to God, just what on earth could I do that I haven't already done? Like
mm.
I wanted more clarity, and I'd been fighting for the marriage for years, and this that was said to me was so stunning that it was just like, I don't even know how to come back from that. And
Yeah.
so and then in that moment, I really very clearly heard God say, not in an audible voice, but it might as well have been, "You have done enough." And
Mm,
I had been praying for a really long time to be released from my vows because just like you said, when I said my vows, I meant them.
yeah.
And divorce was never going to be an option. I did not see
Mm,
myself ever going through a divorce. And, I would never recommend it to anyone when I would talk with friends or people that
mhm.
I went to church with. And, it was just never the answer
Right.
until it was. And, I can't explain what happened in that moment, but I just know that I had clarity that I'd never had before. And everything from that moment on was different. I didn't file for divorce right away. It took another year and a half for that to
Mm,
happen, but I knew in that moment that I was free to do that if that is what I felt like I needed to do, and I was less entangled in all of the toxic arguments and the things that were going on, prior to that and after that. But I just didn't get engaged in it like I did before because I felt a
Mm.
freedom from it. And I knew that my marriage was ending. And I didn't know what it was going to look like. I had no idea what my new life would look like. If I did, I would have done it a lot sooner because it's a lot better.
Oh, yeah,
But
absolutely.
it just, you don't know what you don't know. And in that moment, I knew I had to move in that direction and just trust that I could just put one foot in front of the other. And if the only thing I could see was the next step, that I would be okay. I wouldn't have to know what the whole future looked like. I just needed to know what my next step looked like. And so that's kind of the way I've walked out my life ever since.
Oh, very nice. And I like what you said, that you knew you were free to take that action. Because a lot of people are not free. They feel obligated, or they feel ashamed, like they let those witnesses down, those witnesses being their parents,
Mhm.
their neighbors, everybody else. And they first should be thinking of themselves, right? So for me, the whole thing is such, I don't know, besides being a huge commitment to get into, it's also a huge commitment to get out of,
Mhm.
right? So commitment either way going in, commitment either way going out, because it definitely stems from that blind love, and they do say love hurts, right?
Mhm.
But love hurts only if you let it, right? And
Yeah.
and we can get into a deep conversation on that. But let me ask you, the other question that I had actually asked was, what propelled you to decide to help other people with divorce?
Because I remembered how stuck I felt, and something that you've mentioned a few times is, what I refer to as the victim mentality,
Mm,
and I was very, very enmeshed in that for most of my adult life. I did not believe that I had the power to make decisions that were different than what my spouse wanted. And in fact, I didn't in that relationship. So I just had to go along to get along for my whole life. And my childhood was a little bit like that as well. And so my whole life I had just done a lot of people pleasing, and I
mm,
just kept everything inside that I was thinking and feeling. And as I kind of awoke to what was happening in my life, and the way that that unfolded is a very long story, but I'm actually in the final stages of editing a book that I'm going to release this fall
awesome.
on my story and how I overcame and moved out of that trapped place. But I chose to work with people on that process because as I went through the exodus from what I would refer to as covert narcissistic abuse, I met so many people who were
Mm,
going through it or were still in it,
mhm,
but, like, nobody wants to talk about it, you know? Everybody wants to just gloss over it like, divorce is divorce, but it's a very different thing when you're dealing with a covert narcissist, and
mm,
this is that person that everyone thinks is a great guy or girl, and they can't imagine, that there's all these problems that are happening inside the 4 walls of their home, and yet they are. And people's mental health is being destroyed through these processes and dynamics. And what keeps people there is this learned helplessness of, I can't do anything about it. This is how I have to live. I don't have a choice. I can't make different decisions. And, just a very disempowered position of self-pity, really, like you've mentioned a few times.
mhm,
And I know from my own experience that that's just a mindset issue. It's not true. It's a lie that people are believing. And so I really wanted to just help people, whether it's divorce or abuse recovery or coming out of a cult or any number of other difficult situations in their lives, that they're not powerless. They do have the power to change the way their life is going and the power to feel differently about what is happening in their life. But they have to understand that. before it can become a reality. And so that's really what my coaching is all about.
Well, so I love it because you realize that it's not just you. It's not a journey that you are the only one taking. So many people think that they're the only ones that have gone through this. I'm the only one.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you realize that, hey, you know what? There are other people going through this. And if I can guide them through my experience, through my knowledge, because that's truly what I consider a coach, someone who has done it, someone who's been there,
Hmm.
someone who knows the ins and outs and can guide someone else through that passageway, if you will, right? So to me, that's I love that, and I'm throwing up your website so anybody wants to go and connect with you.
Thank you.
Definitely connect with Annie. I mean, obviously, you know your stuff because not only did you go through it, but you dove deeper. And you're writing a book, so I'm going to need a signed copy when that comes out so I can put it in my shelves, right?
Yeah,
But
you
it
get it.
won't just be in my shelves, it'll be in my hands because every book that I get, I read, right? And I'm an avid reader. I love reading. And for me, it's the knowledge that we get daily that will impact our lives, right?
Yeah.
Because for me, if I'm not learning something new every single day, man, is it going to be a boring day?
I'm the
and,
same
and
way.
just you've enlightened me so much today, and I appreciate that. What advice would you give someone if they're thinking of getting divorced?
I think the most important thing when you're in that place of hopelessness is to understand how you got there. What what could you do? What did you do? What did your partner do or not do? One of the most important exercises that I ever did, and it expanded into something so much more after I went through my divorce. But one, I once sat down and made a list of my unmet needs. And it was at the recommendation of my therapist at the time to just
Mm,
sit down and write everything that you need from this relationship that you're not getting. And from that, I was able to work on what I could with my therapist. What can I change in this? And what can I ask my partner to change in this? And is that change possible? And that kind of became, more or less an outline for, is it possible to save this marriage? Which the answer for me was no. And yet it doesn't have to be no. It could be yes. If you explore what your needs are and what's not being met, and either you can meet that need or your partner can meet that need, then your marriage has hope for being revived in a
right.
way that we all wish ours could have.
Oh
But
yeah.
it just doesn't work out that way. And here's the other part of that. If it doesn't, you just save that list, because then one day when the divorce is all said and done and your heart is healed and you've given yourself time, you're going to go looking for somebody new, and you're going to be able to revisit that unmet needs list as sort of a checklist for what your next relationship is going to look like, and attract that into your life, and what you need, and make sure that your needs are going to be met in any future relationships.
Mm. One of the things and I love that list. And would you consider taking it further into journaling, right? Like the process that you're going through.
Oh yeah.
Because when we journal, we can write down our feelings, what we're going through, how am I feeling, what am I doing about it, and what actions am I taking? What actions are they taking? Because guess what? Unfortunately, lawyers are going to get involved and they're going to say, he said, she said, da, da, da. And then, you know what? You just kind of have to be prepared.
Yeah.
There were some terrible things that I could have done when I went through my divorce, and it was all documented. And I talked to my lawyer about it, and we talked in length, and it wound up being that it would hurt my kids if these things came out. So for me, it was better to protect my kids.
Yeah.
And like I said, ultimately, that was my goal initially. To get married was to have kids.
Mm.
Once I had kids, I did everything to protect them. This is how crazy I was with my kids. When my sons were born, when we went from the bassinet, which was next to our bed. By the way, I don't know how crazy I am, but she wanted to put it on her side of the bed. I said no, put it on my side of the bed, and we agreed to put it in between, at the
The
feet.
foot.
But that's okay because I turned around and slept that way anyway. When we put our sons, and I did for both of them, they're 3 years apart. When we put them in their own bedroom and in a crib for 3 months, I slept on the floor next to my son with a pillow, and she would come in and she goes, "You're crazy." I'm like, "I know, but this kid has changed my life. This is what I live for." Right? So therefore, she would go, "Did he wake up during the night? Because I didn't hear him." I said, "Yeah, but I took care of it." So she she had good night's sleep. So did I. I was lucky that after about a month, both my boys slept through the night. But I was there anyway in case they needed something. For me, it was life changing when we think about this person that's come into our lives that truly is going to teach us so many lessons, because they don't come with instructional manuals, right?
Yeah.
And neither did my ex-wife. And neither did I. I didn't come with an
Yeah.
instructional manual for her, right? So that's the other thing that we have to think about. There is no instructional manual when it comes to marriage, because every relationship is different. You have to be active in it. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure I did things that propelled her to want to get a divorce. I think I probably, obviously, I did not do what I had to do because she was unhappy and she wanted the divorce, right?
Mhm.
So and I'm not just blaming her. Obviously, I must have done something. I still want to know. That's where my journaling came in, because I go back and I revisit the things I did, and I'm like, there's so many things that I did right. I'm sure there were things, but here's the thing, right? If I think I did something right and you think I did something wrong, we're both right,
Mhm.
right? Because it's your opinion and it's my opinion.
Yeah.
So it's, even though I think I did things right and she thought I did things wrong, she's right, but so am I.
Yeah.
But now if
Yeah, and, I often tell people I don't think it's right or wrong, it's
mm,
just about alignment.
yeah,
You are who you are, and if that wasn't what she needed, then you guys just weren't in alignment. There's no right or wrong about it.
correct, correct,
So,
correct.
but I'm so glad you brought up journaling because you
Yeah.
wouldn't even have known this, but the thread, throughout my entire memoir that I'm writing right now is on the basis of journaling.
Mm,
Because if I had not been journaling, I don't think I would have ever awakened to the situation that I was
mm,
in and gotten myself out of it. It brought clarity, and to where there was confusion, and it brought hope to where there was hopelessness. And I cannot say enough good about journaling. I think everybody should be doing it because it's just there's so much that goes on in our
oh
minds all
yeah.
day long, every day. And if you don't pause and spend a few moments reflecting, you really almost miss who you are and
Mm,
what's going on in your life, because it's all just this undercurrent all the time.
yeah.
And the reality is that you can bring it to the forefront and you can explore it and decide, if things are going the way you want them to or not, and what you can do to change them if they're not.
Yeah. Our life goes by so fast. It could be a blur, right? It
Mhm.
could be a blur,
Yeah.
especially if you're miserable.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that you talked earlier about, when we get divorced, right? I I was Roman Catholic when I got married. We got married through the church. And in the Roman Catholic Church, if you get divorced, oh man, that is a no-no. It's like you should be ashamed. How
Mhm.
dare you, you know? And and you talked about how God spoke to you, right? And he wanted you to be happy. He wanted you to do what's right for you. Because in reality, if you do believe in God or Allah or anyone else, a higher being wants us to be happy no matter what. And it doesn't want us to be miserable because you can do everything you in your power to try to have an amazing marriage. But if the other person is making you miserable, it's not going to work.
Mhm.
And you did the thing that was best for you, and God spoke to you. So thank you, God, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, it was very, very pivotal in my life to know that, that to have that assurance that I had done enough because I probably I don't know if I'd ever have given up if I didn't get that clarity,
Mm.
and I would have probably lost my mind trying to do more.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. What's your advice right now for someone who is going through a divorce and they have children and they have to deal with the real estate and they have to deal with finances and they have to deal with in-laws who maybe love them, who are, genuinely think that they're the best thing for their child, or even their own parents who are, you know, just mad that you're divorcing that incredible person. Meanwhile, they don't understand because they didn't live with you. So
Yeah.
there are so many things, but what is your advice for someone who's actually going through it?
My advice is don't do it alone.
Mm.
If you don't hire me, that's fine. Hire a coach
Yeah.
because your best friend or your mom or your sister is too closely involved in the situation to be a good support for you and highly unlikely to have the expertise in the divorce process as well, even if they went through it themselves. So it's like you said, there's just so many aspects to it:
Mm.
emotional, social, legal, financial. And you're supposed to make all these, most important decisions of your life when you're the most emotionally compromised that you've ever been before. Doing that without the support of a coach is not wise. You will make mistakes that can be avoided. So I would say reach out and find a coach and get the support you need, because the more you rely on a coach who's more or less like a project manager for your divorce, the less you're going to spend in legal fees, because a lot of the legal fees are just because nobody knows what they're doing
Mm.
and they're letting their emotions and egos drive the whole process, and that's why it gets ugly and long. And so get the support you need to avoid all of that.
Annie, where were you when I was getting divorced?
Do you know everybody says that? That is like the first thing most people say when I tell them what I do. They're like,
Mm.
"Where were you X number of years ago?" And
Yeah,
my
yeah.
my joking response is, "I was still enmeshed in my toxic marriage. I couldn't have helped you because I couldn't even help myself."
Right, right, right. Yeah,
That's where I was.
absolutely. Yeah, and here's the one thing that I would encourage everyone to do: learn, 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 and learn some more.
Mhm.
Yes, you went into a marriage thinking whatever thinking you were doing, whatever thoughts were in your mind. Maybe like for me, it was lifelong. I was going to be an old person with this person,
Mhm.
but it didn't work out. What lessons did I get so I do not repeat it again?
Yes.
Don't make the mistake. That stove is hot.
Mhm.
Stay away from that stove.
And you know how you don't make that mistake is that you don't leave the relationship thinking they were 100% the
Mhm.
problem.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you think the other person was 100% the problem, then you won't look at anything that you did that contributed to the patterns, and then you won't change, and then you'll attract the exact same person with just a
Mm.
different name,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Totally.
And you'll just repeat the whole process until a number of years later, you'll realize that that's what you did. The only way you can avoid repeating the process is to decide and focus on what did I do or
Mm.
not do?
Mhm.
What did I tolerate or, what did I contribute to the demise of the relationship so that I can do it differently the
Yeah.
next time?
Yeah. You know, one of the things that, and my girlfriend says to me now, she goes, "You're different." She goes, "You're not jealous. So, and you're never questioning me. You're not like looking at my phone. You're not," because she's had some turmoil
Mhm.
relationships.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Look, if you're gonna cheat on me, there's nothing I can do about it. And me looking at your phone or looking at your emails," I said, "it's a waste of my time."
Mhm.
I said, "But you know what? If you're gonna cheat on me, fine." But I vowed to her, I said, "If I ever even think I'm gonna cheat on you, I will call you first." And she's like, "That's kind of weird." I said, "I know." I said, "Because that's not me."
Yeah.
So you know, if you want to worry about me cheating on you, that's on you. But for me, no. You know, I'm not going to worry about it. And if it happens, it happens, and I'll know how to move on from there because obviously I learned, but I don't want to make the same mistakes that I made in my past, right? And you're right. We have to take responsibility. Let's say it was 1,000% the other person's fault. You still have to be responsible because you didn't see the signs.
Yeah.
So you have to look for the signs.
Yep.
And I look for signs.
Mhm.
We all should look for signs, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Be alert and be aware of what you're contributing to your relationships and what you're attracting or allowing in your relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
People treat us the way we let them treat us. So, spend time with people who treat you well,
And
and it makes
that's
all the difference.
those are some wise words, Annie. Thank you so much. Because
Yeah.
it is, right? Who do you want to be with, around with? Surround yourself with people who are showing you love, compassion, and they think that like you're awesome.
Mhm.
If you're around with people who have negativity towards you, it's only going to rub the wrong way. So you have one life and it's so short.
Mhm. That's for
Let's make
sure.
it the best, right?
Yes.
All right. Listen, I want to thank you for today. This was really great, eye-opening stuff, great conversation, and I'm so happy you decided to come on Coaching Call.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.